Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. The thesis of this video is a simple, yet likely controversial one. You do not exist. So, that being the case, you might as well go outside and do some crime. No? Still here? Well, fine then. What I actually mean with that statement is that your character that you run around with in Azeroth does not actually exist within the lore of Warcraft. I think most players recognize this as truth, at least to a certain extent. No matter how many novels you read, even the encyclopedic chronicles, you will not find a single mention of your character's name. None of them, in fact. Unless, of course, you ripped off an official character's name or got insanely lucky, but you get my point. And this is completely understandable by the very nature of what WoW is as a game. It's an MMO. Millions of people play this game. It'd be the most futile exercise ever to attempt to canonize all of their characters. It's not Warcraft 3, where every character you play as is someone that Blizzard themselves did all of the writing for. What I've said so far probably hasn't ruffled too many feathers. What more people may disagree with is this: the player character also does not exist. Allow me to explain. Clearly, there are not hundreds of millions of characters in the lore all doing the exact same things, but it's often espoused that there is a character doing them. Fundamentally, every character that we make is essentially just our personal spin on this tabula rasa of an entity. That Blizzard is writing a story for one character. We're just plugging in the details. Though I've played all of 1 hour or so of it, I think an apt comparison is probably the Warrior of Light from Final Fantasy XIV. I obviously can't comment much on how it works there, but I maintain that within WoW, this is still far too bold of a claim to make. First of all, there are of course some logical impossibilities if we're being strict with it. There's clearly not one character doing all of the Alliance-specific quests and all of the Horde-specific quests, unless they've got an extreme case of split personality. So maybe there are two player characters. Well, there are also racial quests, primarily in starting zones, that are very strongly tied to now 26 different races, as well as the class quests tied to 13 different classes. So maybe there are 26 plus player characters. Or perhaps we simply take the route of least resistance here and say those particular quests aren't that important and you can just attach whatever ones you want to the much larger resume the player character has. This has probably become easier and easier to do over the years since allied races honestly don't have much in the way of their own quests, and we haven't had a meaningful difference between the Alliance and Horde experience since Battle for Azeroth. But I remain stubborn and attest that even that is poppycock. It's a convenient mentality to subscribe to, I'll admit. Chronicles, in particular, tends to describe the downfall of certain raid bosses as being a coordinate effort of the factions or a band of adventurers. Maybe you, as an individual, didn't slay Lei Shen, but surely you and 24, maybe 29 similarly qualified individuals could have handled the job. Which, hey, that lines up pretty close with the 26 metric from earlier. But I think that's still quite absurd. Not necessarily any specific example, but the culmination of them all. Occasionally, I'll read a forum post where a player is acting indignant that they, Downfall of the Lich King, Slayer of Deathwing, Conqueror of the Burning Legion, Death Lord of the Ebon Blade, Champion of Azeroth, and the Mawwalker, still gets quests asking them to collect bear rumps. And I find listing our characters' supposed feats off like that really highlights the absolute absurdity of accepting them all at face value. That's a lot of stuff for one being, even the most important being on the planet, to have under their belt. Frankly, too much. The community has always hated when one character gets the spotlight for too long. It happened with Thrall in Cataclysm, it happened with Sylvanas in BFA and Shadowlands, it's even sort of happening with Xal'atath despite her generally being quite well received at first. Do you really want your character to have that presence in the narrative, but 10 times over? What about the complaints that the Jailer planned everything since Warcraft 3? Or that Chronicles made an absurd number of plot points the machinations of N'Zoth, and to an extent the other old gods. It's bad for one entity to be the cause of so many problems, but fine for one entity to be the solution to just as many? Or is it simply because it's your character that you don't mind? Like, it reminds me of how Game of Thrones treated Arya in the latter seasons. She became superhuman and was given feats left and right, even if she had no personal ties to the storylines. It just changed her character from likable to someone I hated having on screen. So no, I don't even accept that this supposed character participated in the majority of major events that transpired across the history of WoW. because that, to me, would be a very, very terrible story. Us seemingly doing so is merely a byproduct of WoW being a game that needs to give us stuff to do. Actually subscribing to your character having done everything feels like the delusions of someone who really relishes in power fantasy. It's certainly easier for me to disregard a few cutscenes where my character is standing silently behind Thrall than to believe my one dude is doing all of that stuff. I'm willing to accept that anyone's character may have been part of an army for a few major lore events, but that's about it. Granted, I'm not the authority on the matter. Blizzard's stance and your own stance are far more relevant here, but I did want to share my stance on it all. To be honest, most players probably don't even think about it and just like to bonk. Ain't nothing wrong with that either. I feel a lot of what I'm saying probably resonates more strongly with the classic crowd more so than retail. I do plan on making a classic character. Eventually. When I have the free time. Yeah. Anyway, back then, you were very much a mere foot soldier, a cog in the machine, a common adventurer, only slightly more capable than the average grunt. It was far more plausible for your single character to be involved in the majority of your gameplay exploits. It was quaint. It was, in some sense, relatable. For the longest time, you had to get places by using just your own 2 feet, wearing really bad gear. And it felt right. For better, or in my opinion, worse, WoW went the route of every JRPG or D&D campaign in existence. First level is taking out some bandits, last level is killing the literal divine. I've rolled with it since it's hardly enough to make me abandon the game, but it is an aspect I would massively scale back if I could. I have to appreciate Dragonflight for doing that even to a modest extent. Yes, Azeroth herself was still at stake by the end, but more so of some wishy-washy Emerald Dream mechanics than due to Farak just being the baddest dude ever. And at any rate, certainly more tangible stakes than the rewriting of reality itself we had just come from. I know it goes against conventional storywriting wisdom to lower the stakes. The action must rise. But Azeroth is a vast world, and we have other worlds beyond as well. We don't need to be telling one constantly escalating story. We can just tell different stories, set in different locations, with different characters having different problems. Keep us feeling more like adventurers or mercenaries, and not the grand savior of the multiversal cosmos, you know? Vertical progression only works until you start ramming your head into the ceiling. Eventually, you have to embrace horizontal progression as well. Housing was never something I concerned myself that much with, but one thing I have to appreciate about it is that it inherently grounds our characters. It's something that a lot of players will spend a lot of time on, but which is very difficult to turn into a power fantasy. I mean, maybe if you make it a literal shrine to your character or decorate it with nothing but cutting edge decor, but that's a bit boring. And either way, you're sharing your neighborhood with potentially 54 other people with identically sized lots and budgets. You clearly aren't that special. Really, it's only a fantasy in the sense that you get to own an actual house, unlike in real life. So yeah, this script sort of wound up being an amalgam of 2 video ideas that I had, that the player character doesn't exist, and that I want to go back to being a simple adventurer. Neither felt like large enough topics to be their own videos, but they were easy enough to connect. And as a result of that stitchery, perhaps the point of the video swerved somewhat there. It was very much a train of thought process for me. My bad. Anyway, for this week's video, I decided to draw Hogger. I just wanted somebody that was emblematic of low stakes, and whose downfall could be attributed to basically anybody. Now, my first character was a Tauren Shaman, but my second character was a human paladin. But I'll be honest, I don't really have a formative memory of dealing with Hogger. I'm guessing there just happened to be other players nearby, so killing him wasn't that big of a deal for me. But I do still appreciate the meme status that he ascended to. I appreciate that the HOTS development team managed to squeeze him in as the last playable hero, before they had basically all of their resources stripped away from them. And when I went to BlizzCon 2023, I saw one heck of an awesome cosplay of him, complete with the actual Knoll sound as a recording. Mad props to whoever did that. And I already used Elwyn Forest for Anduin, so I pretty much had to go with Stormwind Stockades for this one. And hey, when else would I ever draw the Stockades? I think it turned out pretty okay. I do appreciate Gnolls as a pretty low stakes mongrel race, but I hope that when people call for Gnolls as a playable race, they're just BSing you. But hey, that's just my opinion. Okay then, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye bye!